Thank you. And Gene Benson's here. He is the editor-in-chief of schoolnewssaturdays.com, which is where we collect the news and make the breaking headlines available for everybody. So if you haven't visited us at schoolnewssaturday.com, I'd encourage you to go over there and check out some of the headlines we've uncovered. As a general big picture, students took AP exams this week, which we're going to talk about. Didn't go so well for a lot of them. Students are starting to experience alternative graduation scenarios because, campuses, high schools are not having their big ceremonies in the gymnasium. So we've got some really cool responses to having virtual graduation ceremonies. So we've got AP tests, we've got graduation ceremonies, we've got May 1st deposit day deadlines. Didn't happen this week, so we don't have a lot of news about that, and we're all still trying to decide what we're going to do on June 1st for those deposit days. We've got tons of colleges telling us that they're going to be open in the fall. Gene, what do you think? You think they're going to be open?
Oh, they'll be open, but will they be open for in-person classes?
Yeah. Hey, Gene, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Can you do the pitch? Good morning and welcome to Q&A Saturday, another Rockstar webinar. I'm Gene Benson. With more than 10 years of experience in higher education, Erica Gillette visited hundreds of college campuses and has been advising students since 2004. In 2017, Erica founded Rockstar Academics to give students and families a saner approach to choosing a college. Today, she's on a mission to change the way American families approach the college decisions and inspire them to dream big about their future. At Rockstar Academics, students apply to college with the end in mind by deciding what they want first. As a result, they don't just get into college, they get into their own vision of their future.
Gene, tell us about the news. I'm going to try to get Facebook in on the action today.
Yeah, well, see, I got us going with North Texas because some colleges there are admitting we're going to be online only because that's the only safe thing to do. We have other colleges that are saying, no, we're going to go headfirst into classes in person on the campus because that's the best thing possible. As you and I know, we've discussed elsewhere, that the virologists, the science world says, you open everything up, you're going to have a second wave of crises and people becoming ill. So I think that something that you said weeks ago remains incredibly true. That is, what's the plan? If you're if you're a student thinking about going to school, or you're a parent helping to supervise a student thinking about going to school, what is your plan? What do you think you're going to do when this virus rears its ugly head again, as is so predicted?
Oh my gosh. It's true. Well, and it is kind of the theme today that we're going to talk about is whether or not you have a plan. I mean, there are other schools besides Cal State who have taken this courageous step to say, look, we're going to plan to go online. And the reason that they're making that decision, they really have to stick their necks out to make that decision, but they are making that decision because it gives them the opportunity to have a plan for the fall, because we all know that we have no idea what's going to happen, right? That's what we know. We know we haven't got any clue what really life is going to look like. I think that's one of the things this coronavirus has really driven home, is that we really never do know. And we've had this luxury of believing we were certain because life was predictable, but we really are never certain, and colleges have never been certain. And right now, the risk of things going differently is very, very high. And so the Chancellor of Cal State has come out. I'm going to read the statement to you. He's made a very courageous decision, in my opinion. But Cal State is not the only one, right? There's schools in Texas, schools other places.
Yeah, some are coming together with plans how we're going to be online because we recognize the world has changed. Others are going, oh no, it's all over. We're sure it's done. We're going to go back to just like regular. Purely my opinion, upon reading a lot of this news, is that I think a great deal of the response of the institution is based upon the financial health of the institution. Those who desperately need money, desperately need students to come and buy room and board and tuition, because that's what finances so much of higher education.
Right. So we've advised some families. I've been doing this program since the beginning of this crisis, where I offer just free conversations about your family's situation, one-on-one after these broadcasts. And you can go to rockstarstrategysessions.com to find a time on my calendar. There's absolutely no charge. I'm asking for a $20 donation to the Red Cross just to make sure we get serious inquiries, as it said, but just no cost. And I've been hearing from families all over who are trying to figure out what should they do, and how should they choose a school that's going to take good care of their student, right? And so, we've always been focusing on that question, but the answer to the question is a little bit different than it used to be, right? And so, I want to commend the chancellor of Cal State and all the schools who've been honest and who've been proactive. Southern New Hampshire University, of course, is all in the news. They're offering scholarships, and they have really worked hard at a program that responds to the situation proactively, right? And so that's one of the things you should be looking for. How's the school that you're considering, how are they actually responding right now to the crisis? And do you like the way they're responding? Does it look like they're being proactive? Does it look like they're going to be able to respond and do a good job? Or does it look like they are, as a columnist from Inside Higher Ed, was it Inside Higher Ed, said that colleges are deluding themselves? So does it look like they're deluding themselves? Because if they are, you don't want to be part of that, right? So that's a big question, and one that I've been talking to a lot of families about how to answer. So yeah, you're right, Jean.
Yeah, I think if I were a parent with a college-age student today sending one away, that a couple of my questions would be, as you just said, what's the college's plan for this presumed recurrence of the pandemic? And secondarily, what would be my plan? How am I going to get my kid home? Because that's where I'm going to want my kid, because that's who I am.
It's the truth. It's totally the truth.
But I don't think I'm very unusual that way. So that to me would be the key questions. If I were a parent, I'd be looking at real hard after I got down to a limited number of colleges being considered.
Well, I was reading. We're doing this fantastic workshop next weekend, which I'll talk to you guys about later, to help families actually make this decision. And I'm preparing all the material, right? And so one of the things I was looking at was, how do you set yourself up for good decision making, which of course it's really the question, isn't it? I'm pausing. How do you set yourself up for good decision? I'm still fussing with Facebook. I really should let it go, but I just can't. It just makes me so mad.
Just can't let go. Okay.
I just can't let go. How do you set yourself up for good decision making is the question, when I can get back to it. Share on a page you manage is what we're going to try to do. You guys hang with me. Next. Click next. And you're hanging with me because I want to make sure we reach our audience this morning, and so many people show up on Facebook looking for us that I'd kind of like to have something for them to see over there. Okay. We have reached almost 400 families with this broadcast over the last 6 months. I know that is really an amazing thing. And so here we go. I'm going to click go live. We're going to do the best we can. Let's see. Live May. I wish I could share my screen. I guess that would be a little bit more interesting. May 16. So like I said, Gene is the editor-in-chief of our newspaper, and he is constantly combing the internets all week long. That's been at Saturday. Live May 16th, School News Saturday. Does that sound like what we're doing here, you guys? Okay.
That sounds, I think, was kind of the goal originally anyway. I may be wrong.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, it does in fact look like it's going to work. Marcia Quamby, thank you so much for hanging with me while I deal with all that technical stuff. It looks like we are going to go live, which is a good thing. So we are live. It looks like we are in fact live now. Okay, fantastic. So we're live on Facebook. Thank goodness. And like I said, the reason it was I really took a minute to do that is that we have actually reached more than 400 families with this broadcast over the last 9 weeks. Gene, can you believe it? To imagine.
So, that's a pretty good rate when you consider that we started out as the Shusing. This is not NBC.
This is not NBC. We have, and last week I made a bunch of jokes about my fancy microphone that we have installed. But we started off on March 28th or March 21st, I think, with broadcasting with my my headset with the little microphone hanging off, and it was so difficult to hear the replay that we invested in. I mean, we've come a long way technologically, but gosh, we've come a long way in terms of understanding this crisis and in terms of being able to give parents and families good advice. I mean, I've lost an uncountable number of nights of sleep lying in bed wondering, because my business, Rockstar Academics, I advise families and I try to give them a saner approach to the college admissions process, which can be so incredibly crazy. And it's an impossibly difficult choice under normal circumstances. And this year, the choice of where to go to, if the choice of whether to go to college, where to go to college, what to study in college, it creates so much stress for families that I believe that it inhibits families from making the best choice. So now in this environment, it's been even more important to try and come up with ways to bring the noise down and really focus on what matters about that choice. And 9 weeks ago, we were talking about some very, very basic survival questions. And now we're still talking about those, but we're also now starting to be able to look at the really important stuff, which is you're going to college to get an education. So are you going to be able to get one or not? Right?
That really, I think, in our discussions offline, that we talked about that. The real important question is the career path you select, does it require this college credential? If yes, then you need to go do that.
So Jean, you've got an alarm going off over there.
Uh-oh. Thank you.
But you did say some great things, which were does the college offer the thing that you really need, right? And that's a question that I think in the past, well, a lot of families, even clients of mine, had the luxury of just really kind of guessing at. Going to college, and we know that some things are going to become clear along the way, and that's just it just really was never a great way to approach the college choice process. But right now, not being clear on why you're doing it can get you in a lot of trouble, because and this is what we talked about last week. This is what the workshop that we're designing for next weekend is about, is you've got to set a target on the wall right now. And the reason you have to set a target, you have to have a goal in mind, is that the way you get there is very likely going to change in the next 4 years. And so you've got to be going after something so that when an obstacle shows up, you know how to change your plan and still arrive at the place you were going, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If we're driving down the road going from town 1 to town 2 and the road is closed in front of us, we still want to get to town 2.
We still want to get there, right? We still want to get to the target. So obstacles, the exit closed on the freeway. What do? Well, you just go to the next exit, right? And you might have to hook a U-turn to get back, but you know where you were trying to get to, and so you can figure out whether there's another way to get there. If you're just in college trying to figure out where you're going, and now you have to change your plans, it's very hard to stay on track for a plan to nothing, or a plan to we don't know what, right?
Yeah, and if you're trying to build a plan while you're in college, that's very similar to trying to build your car while you're driving down the road.
Which, in these times, we're all building our airplane while we fly it, right? With so much uncertainty, but it's really not the best plan.
There's no real driven reason why a college student should be putting themselves in that kind of box walking in. They should have a pretty good idea before they walk in. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they want to maybe change that plan, but they should have a pretty good plan.
So having a plan is a really hard thing to do. And I've been reading a bunch of, like I was saying before I started to say, I've been doing all this preparation for the workshop next week, and I've been reading all of this really interesting stuff about the latest science on decision making, right? And what causes us to make good decisions, what creates an environment for good decision making, and what creates an environment for bad decision making. And the science is pretty clear, right? Levels of extreme stress. I came across this number, and I couldn't find a source for it, and that frustrates me quite a bit. But I came across a number that said that extreme levels of household or personal stress can reduce your decision making quality the same as having your IQ reduced by 13 points. So stress at home, personal stress reduces your IQ, doesn't actually reduce your IQ, but it reduces the results of your decisions the same as if you had lost 13 IQ points. And I can say I've personally experienced that to be true, and I know it's true for all of us right now. So how do we mitigate the stress and the uncertainty that's in the world, which we can't change, to increase our good decision making in other ways to keep us on track? So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about in this workshop next week. I'm going to go ahead though and break to talking about the news this week, because gosh, we do have some interesting stories to talk about. So let's see. Well, we are still in fact live on Facebook, you guys. I guess that's a good thing. Sometimes I'm not sure, but it does definitely give people a chance to say hi. So we've got some folks watching there, which is good. So here's our screen. Here's the first set of headlines this week. It's been, in some ways, the news is a little sleepy right now because we're all doing what I'm really going to encourage us not to do, which is wait to see what happens. And so in some ways, the news about schools is slowing down in the sense that the things we thought were happening and the things that we are waiting on haven't happened yet. But of course, as a general big picture, students took AP exams this week, which we're going to talk about. Didn't go so well for a lot of them. Students are starting to experience alternative graduation scenarios because, campuses, high schools are not having their big ceremonies in the gymnasium. So we've got some really cool responses to having virtual graduation ceremonies. So we've got AP tests, we've got graduation ceremonies, we've got May 1st deposit day deadlines. Didn't happen this week, so we don't have a lot of news about that, and we're all still trying to decide what we're going to do on June 1st for those deposit days. We've got tons of colleges telling us that they're going to be open in the fall. Jean, what do you think? You think they're going to be open?
Oh, they'll be open, but will they be open for in-person classes?
Yeah. And here's what I want to say. We're going to come back to that question in just a second. They may say they're open and they may open, but how long will they be open? And do they have a plan for closing? Because that's very likely what might happen, right?
Well, if you're a parent who's paid for a student who's going, let's say, across a state line or two away, and there's some sort of moving process involved in getting they and their possessions to, what's your plan for getting the student and possessions, or at least student, home again from all those miles away?
Right, because everybody in this room and many people who know I'm an aviation buff. I'm a pilot. I don't fly 737s, and nobody else does either anymore. And the aviation industry is in almost as big a collapse as the education industry. Yeah, you heard me right, almost as big, because this is an enormously devastating time for the aviation industry. But I don't think any industry has been hit as hard as education. So that's right. Aviation, no, if you send your kid halfway across the country, how's he going to get home?
Yeah.
He may not be flying the plane. So there are a whole bunch of things to be considering. And I think that the right decision for a student this year is not what we thought it was going to be 6 months ago. It's just not. So 37% of American families say they're changing their mind about what they're going to do. They're going to do something different. And I think that's right. I think that the right answer is probably something different. You're back, and I want to talk about the big headlines of the week here. I'm sharing my screen instead of my camera, because we've got a couple of really controversial topics to talk about this week, which maybe is a good thing. I don't know, maybe I'll make somebody mad, but one of the big stories of the week was it yesterday that the conference call of college presidents, not very many college presidents. Okay, you guys, 14 college presidents, which is a very small number. There are 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. So these 14 guys were sort of the heavy hitters, got on a conference call with Vice President Pence. And why did they do that? What were they asking for? This is amazing. You guys is going to.
They're just looking for big money.
They're looking for money, or are they looking for guarantees?
Well, they
yeah,
want
that's right.
two things. One is they want big money. They're pushing for a $14 billion kind of stimulus for college education at large.
So hang on there. So $14 billion. So higher education industry got the first CARES Act threw a bone to the education industry, but it was a tiny little bit of what the analysts said that was going to be required to keep everybody in business. So the real number was more like 16 billion, and they got a tiny bit of 16. And now they're still asking basically for the rest of it, right? So they're getting on the phone saying, where's our money?
Yeah. And secondarily, they have finally recognized something that's been painfully obvious, is that most of the world workers' compensation kind of insurance laws affected students also. So if you get hurt, sick, etc. at a college, and it's the college's fault, or reasonably so, the college is going to be on the hook for the medical bill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they're looking for, is they're looking for, please shield us from this liability.
Right. So this is the force majeure question in terms of how it affects higher education. It's a really good question. I mean, so let's think about this. I mean, you know, the way I've interpreted the headlines here, they're sued if they do, they're sued if they don't. I mean, higher education institutions, they really are squeezed between a rock and a hard place. If you are one of our regular listeners, watchers, we do have some regular people who join us. You know, I'm no apologist for higher education. The industry has been a mess for a long time. They've been really hiding from some important changes for a long time. So I'm not making excuses, okay? But really, they are between a rock and a hard place because, you know, most institutions to some extent are tuition driven. They do depend on that tuition number, the number that is the dollars coming in from tuition to run their operations. And so if they can't count on students coming, or if students come and then need refunds because they had to go home, you know, the salaries are already paid, the insurance premiums are already paid, the physical plant needs still exist, and yet they can't count on revenue coming in, right? And so, you know, we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially students suing colleges that weren't able to deliver refunds for, you know, on-campus instruction. Didn't happen, right? And so the students, they have I don't want to use the word right. I'm stumbling to not say they have a right to a refund, because, you know, the rights that are given to us in the Constitution are a small number. But they certainly have a legitimate claim, let's say, to wanting their money back, especially for things like room and board, which they're neither living nor eating on campus. So the colleges are responding better and worse to those requests. And if they haven't responded in a way that, you know, if they haven't done the right thing and given some of the money back, they're getting sued, right?
Well, let's face
So
it, the students that are in college today are of the internet age. They expect swift answers to everything. They're used to not having to, you know, I got to wait 300 milliseconds? What? That's like way too long. Most higher education groups are used to having weeks to think through problems. And we saw it in the newspapers. We saw multiple institutions that when they told students back in February and March, go home, it's, you know, you can't stay here because it's no longer safe here. You know, so get out. Basically, they were locked out of what they thought was going to be their residence for a year. Those students were upset when they said, hey, we need the money back. And a large number of those institutions, at least initially, said, yeah, no refund.
yeah, so here's the thing. I saw, especially in those early weeks, we saw people defending the colleges, saying, you know, the colleges, well, I'm trying to, I don't want to put words in someone's mouth, and so I also can't remember exactly how they were saying it, but we did see colleges saying, you know, this is force majeure, we can't give money back, this is all that, and really even some kind of despicable defenses, right? But think about the rock and a hard place that they're in, because yes, they do need to give money back for some of that stuff, right? But as a result of that, what do? So they close campus, which I think, and by the way, I was listening, it might have been Jeff Selingo, who is a fantastic analyst of higher education, or maybe it was a guest on one of his podcasts, saying, you know, actually the honest truth is that higher education has done an an unbelievably good job in responding quickly to a crisis. So, this happened and colleges closed. They got students off campus, which was what they needed to do to save lives, right? So they got students off campus. Now, maybe if they'd had more time to think about it, if they'd known it was coming, they might have been more prepared to do it in a more graceful way and all that other stuff. But they saved lives by getting students off campus. We hope. And that's fantastic. And, education in general actually responded fantastically well by closing campus and coming up with a variety of responses to try and continue to deliver instruction with no advance warning. And so actually for an industry that is known to be exactly the way you described it, which is glacial in their response time, I really do think that, we have to commend them for acting quickly, for acting what is amazingly quickly for an education institution. However, right now what we're seeing the result is that it has revealed a tremendous amount of what I like to call the broken promise of higher education. So, they're not able to hide behind the fact that, nobody knows what happens in the classroom because it's on Zoom. And so we're all watching and we're seeing that the quality of instruction may not be what we thought it was. And right this minute, it's hard to parse out what part is terrible because of the circumstances and the lack of preparation, and what part is terrible because it was terrible. And so in general, I think it's important to keep in mind that these institutions have responded really quickly, and a quick response is often not the most quality response. And students are upset, as they should be. Families are concerned about quality, as they should be. Campuses are concerned, as they should be, about, well, that may have been the right thing to do when we didn't know how to keep people safe, but how do we respond going forward in a way that is responsible, that we can try to do the best job we can to educate while still keeping students safe. So, if they send students home, and they're getting sued for sending students home, right? But now the question is, if we let students come back, if we do what everybody's pressuring us to do, which is we open our campuses, and that's what everybody wants, and it's what we say we're going to try to do, and then students get sick and we get sued, we don't exist anymore. So that was like, gosh, a 5-minute long rant, which was to say, so these colleges, these 12 college presidents have called the vice president's office this week and said, what can you do to protect us against getting sued if we do the best we can and an act of God, i.e. a pandemic, happens anyway? And we've also got predictions from some scientists predicting that there's no way to protect, right? And so there was this very dire testimony by Dr. Fauci to Congress this week saying, this is the quote I had on the screen a minute ago, where he basically said the idea that we're going to be able to contain this, the idea that we're going to be able to contain it well enough to have students going back to campus in the fall, he says it's a bit of a stretch to say that's going to be possible. So now we've got campuses, they're trying to figure out how to be open without doing something that makes them liable, right?
That's a big deal. So
That's a big deal.
We, go back to that question about online classes. Do they work?
Well, that's
my feeling as a old educator. I think that those actually work well for the vast majority of didactic kinds of classes.
They do. And I think I've touched on this every single week too. And again, I was listening to the founder of Noodle Education, who was also before the founder of either Princeton Review or Kaplan Review. I'm sure he would die if I were to know that I was confusing the two. But he, an innovator in education, which I hope that, at Rockstar Academics, we're innovating in education and trying to use technology to improve the quality of instruction. But that doesn't happen overnight, right? And so everywhere, in every single inch of the United States, people are experiencing the worst possible version of online education. It's just terrible. And that's not what it can be. It's not what it doesn't reach the potential, right? We've been talking about the darn flipped classroom in education for 20 years, and the flipped model of the classroom is that students go learn the material, they're introduced themselves to the material at home, they watch a video, they read a book before they come to class, and then the live interaction between the students, each other, and the instructor is about the material that they've already looked at, instead of showing up and having someone just read and talk to them and deliver information. That's the flipped classroom. So it existed before online learning existed. It was just go home and read and then come talk about it. And now online learning and these amazing platforms like Noodle, like Blackboard, well, Blackboard's not really that exciting, but all these great platforms that allow information delivery in an interactive and interesting way that the students in control of when they learn, how many times they can watch it, where they watch it. They can get a video or an audio or a diagram or all these other things, right? So they can be in control of how they receive the information. And then an instructor can what's the word I'm looking for? Can moderate a great discussion. Look, all those things make education better. It makes outcomes better. We have science showing that an interactive hybrid delivery of education and information improves student outcomes and students learn more. That's not what you're getting right now. And it's not worth $50,000. But that wonderful thing I just described, it might be. Right? So hang on, guys, it's coming.
Well, let's be honest, a lot of instructors have a difficult time with technology that is more advanced than an overhead projector.
Well, it's true, right? I mean, educators, the average age, and this is an issue too, right? The average age of a college professor is, not 25, right? It's well over 50. And, teachers are also usually in middle age. And so many of them are what we are now referring to as vulnerable populations. There's a whole conversation going on in the channels of education industry about whether teachers will come back to the classroom, whether professors will show up to teach. What do we do?
Yeah.
Because it's great that all the college students are so young that coronavirus isn't going to kill them, but it might kill everybody who's teaching if we don't control the virus in such a way. Oh my God, I just said something so sensational. You guys don't put that all over Twitter. But it's a real issue, right? College students are by and large not a vulnerable population, but college professors, high school teachers, university and school administrators, many of them are vulnerable. So it's not just an issue of college students being healthy, right?
So it really is true that it's a different world. I don't know how, I don't understand the technology myself as to how they're going to do those classrooms that require laboratories and kinesics kinds of education, which, if you're a chem major, you can do a lot on computer as far as computer simulation of chemical reactions, but there's no replacement for going into the lab and using labware.
One of the most interesting side conversations that I have been listening to throughout this whole thing is the way it has uncovered so many cognitive biases that we have about education. So, there's this sort of standard set of cognitive biases that behavioral scientists talk about, right? The fallacies that we constantly trick ourselves with, but so many of them are at play when we talk about education, right? So we believe that what we have is better than the thing we might get instead. We talked about that last week. We hold on so tightly to the thing that we're sure about. The devil that we know is so much less scary than the devil we don't know. And so we think, oh my gosh, what if it's different? And the truth is that different could be so much better, but we've got to let go. So that's one of the things that I think is really true, is that those of us who have spent our lives in education are definitely grieving what isn't possible anymore and how things will be different. But it's also true, as I've said now 3 times in the last 30 minutes, right? That it's also true that some of the changes that we're going to see are changes that needed to happen, that we've been hanging on to modes that have been outdated a while already, right? College education, the basic model of sending your young and privileged children off to this, ivory tower for 4 years is 1,000 years old or 2,000 years old, and it hasn't necessarily adapted to use the best of technology. And now we're going to have to see that happen. And so overall, I think my advice to families is, if you're looking for a school that's a safe place to choose in the fall, be looking for places that are embracing the change in all of the ways that means. All of the clients I'm working with, we're talking about that. We are looking for institutions that are embracing the change instead of denying that it's there, right? Saying, oh, things are going to go back to normal in the fall. That's dangerous, right? Let me show you, let me put the next set of headlines up, and let's talk about why that's dangerous, right? That's dangerous. And that's not what we want. It's not what we want for, yeah, it's a little better, isn't it? It's not what we want. So we're looking for institutions that are being bold and being honest about the change, and being honest about how they're responding to change, right? So the second set of headlines that really made a big splash this week was Cal State. And I had conversations with several really smart people this week. Several different conversations with really smart people who said, oh my gosh, can you believe what Cal State has done? They're just going to go online. And I think we're disappointed. I think that's where that comes from. It's another one of those cognitive biases that was being thrown in the spotlight now is,
Well, there's no football if you're online.
well, there's some headlines about football at schoolnewssaturday.com that we found this week too. But this is another cognitive bias, right? We're disappointed. We want it to be the way.
Doesn't match our expectations.
Doesn't match our expectations. It doesn't match what we thought was going to happen. We're out of our comfort zone, and so it must be bad. So yeah, we're disappointed. I'm disappointed that the largest university system in the country has been honest about the fact that they have to plan for being closed, right? So, Cal State. So for those of you who are hearing the headline, who have come here to hear the headlines for the first time, and you're seeing this headline for the first time, Cal State, the largest university system in the United States, has actually taken what I believe is a bold move and gone ahead and said, look, we're planning to be online in the fall. So we've seen something like 70 to 73% of colleges and universities during the last week of April, which is the week leading up to decision day for many of those schools. So in the last week of April, we saw something like 73% of colleges coming out with statements saying, we are planning to be open in the fall. We are planning for business as usual in the fall. We're going to open our campus in the fall. Now, what do you think is going on there where all these schools are coming out with such categorically confident statements about the fall? The week before decisions have to be made, right? They're trying to convince the consumer to write the check, is what they're doing. And this is it's not entirely honest marketing. I'm very disappointed in the campuses that are I don't think they're being dishonest. I think they're deluding themselves, as the opinion columnist said this week. They're not being honest. They're not being honest with themselves. They're hoping against hope that they can instill confidence in families instead of being honest. And, I want to write, Tim White, I want to write him an email and say, look, you're a hero for being realistic here. And this is what he said. He's been criticized by lots of smarter people than the people that I've been on the phone with, saying, how can you do this? How can you not plan to serve your population in the way they expect to be served? And here's what he's saying. He says, our goal is we hope for the best, but our goal is to plan, as the quote on the screen says here, our goal is to plan for the most rigorous, difficult moment, right? Does this sound like a pilot? I wonder if he's a pilot. This is what they teach you, right? You need to plan for the engine to go out at 20,000 feet. Because if it does and you don't have a plan, you're hosed.
Bad things happen.
So this is Tim White. He's saying, look, we got to plan for the most rigorous moment while we hope for the best moment. And probably we're going to find ourselves somewhere in between, which is the truth, right? And I just want to read this. I want to put his own words in his mouth for you guys. He says, it's wise to plan now and over the next several months with enriched training and improvements in virtual learning environments. So, and that's exactly what I'm saying, right? By making the statement now, he buys himself time. He buys himself budget money that he now doesn't have to spend planning for a different scenario, right? Instead, he can spend his time, his money, his faculty's time, his administrator's money on planning and training to do that amazing virtual learning experience I described instead, right? So we're going to plan for that worst case scenario, and then hopefully we can pull back in the bit. We can pull back a bit in the fall. I'm trying to use his words. We can pull back a bit in the fall for more in person as circumstances allow, right? But this statement in red that's on the screen here, it would be irresponsible to approach it the other way around and wait until August and then be scrambling and unprepared for a robust learning environment online. So this is bold and responsible decision-making on Tim White's part. And I'm going to stick my neck out to congratulate him, because it's difficult to be leading an institution of that size and to have the decisions that you make affect millions of lives. It's tough to make a call like that. I bet he didn't have too many good nights of sleep either.
Yeah.
But this decision that he's made is allowing his institution to focus on doing the best they can. So look, if you're making this decision in the fall, you need to be looking for someone like Tim White at the head of that institution. You know, I've gone out of my way to praise Northeastern University, which is kind of at the other end of the higher education spectrum as a expensive private single campus university, with a high quality educational product, and Cal State, which is a great big system, public system with a high quality education product. And both those institutions have done a great job responding. And there are other choices. There's Beloit College, which has done a fantastic job designing a hybrid education option for students. Southern New Hampshire University, which is launching a very innovative response that's going to allow students to come to campus and have the campus experience while keeping them out of the classroom and keeping their exposure to the virus low. Or Arizona State University is another great example. They've been at it a long time trying to innovate and incorporate online programs. So you're looking, as a family, you're looking for places that are obviously trying to respond in a proactive way and embrace change. You don't want to be at a school that is holding their breath for things to go back to normal. And you as a family don't want to be holding your breath for things to go back to normal. That's not a good plan, guys, because it's not going back to normal. And we don't want it to go back to the way it used to be. We really don't, right? Okay, you're not looking at my screen. I was about to say, I'm going to take that slide off, but we're already off. I got a couple more. But I want to take a breath here. We're well into the program, and I'm going to take a breath here. And Jean, what's coming up for you? We've got folks watching us on Facebook. We got a couple new folks here in the Zoom room. And what else have we got?
Well, let's see. Over in the news world. Oh, is it worthwhile going to college? And so, just as a answer to my own question, I read you a headline. Graduate degrees boost job prospects during the pandemic more than any others. And it was over a 50% increase of folks that had a graduate degree were getting new jobs even during the pandemic era compared to any other educational group that they surveyed. So does it have value? The question that is valid to ask remains, if you want to be in a career that requires degrees, yes, it has value.
This is some tough love, you guys. So, I want to put the slide up in a second to talk about the workshop we're doing next week. So, in fact, I will go ahead and put it up, even though we still have a headline to talk about. So we got to come back to talk about AP tests Something like what 10,000 students had trouble submitting their AP test this week. So we're going to come back to
10,000, yeah.
come back to talk about that great headline. But let's take a second because you just brought up a great point. So I'm doing a workshop next Saturday, and it'll be after this broadcast. So it'll be at 12 o'clock on the West Coast, and 3-hour workshop to help families think through what is the best decision for them in the fall. And you brought up one of the most important considerations, right? Because as I talked about last week, as I try to talk about with everyone that I'm advising, it's important to put a target on the wall before you make a decision. So how do we create an environment for good decision making? Step number one, and you know, the folks over at 80,000 Hours, which is a fantastic organization that is dedicated to helping people make good career decisions. And they are graduates of Y Combinator. I was in startup school at Y Combinator this last year too. So some smart people talking about the way to make a good decision about your career. One of the things they say is you've got to identify specific choices and then choose between them. You can't just sort of choose between, well, maybe over here and well, maybe over there. You can't, there's an impossible choice to choose between maybe this and maybe that. You've got to say, my choices are go to school anyway, no matter what happens, don't go to school, no matter what happens, or come up with something in between that helps come up with a combination, right?
Right.
And so that brings the question. It's the question everybody's asking. It's the headline. I was on the news last week talking about this question. Are Zoom classes worth $50,000? So you can't answer that question if you've got maybe over here and maybe over there. You've got to have a target on the wall that you're aiming after. And then the question doesn't become, are Zoom classes worth $50,000 a year? First of all, nobody pays $50,000 a year, so that's a false question. But second of all, it's not the Zoom classes. It's the goal you're after.
Mhm.
So is the goal you're after worth working at this year, right? And so it depends on your goal. I'd like to talk a little bit about what that decision looks like. Right now, I'd like to stop and talk about that decision for a second, because if you have a clear goal in mind, it makes decision making easier, right? You have a goal to weigh your decision against, and you say, this is the goal I'm after. Is which of my choices gets me closest to my goal? Okay, so it's not about whether the classes are worth $50,000. I mean, in some way it is. Look, don't Twitter me to death over this. Of course, I understand. It's a different product. It requires a different price. There's a whole episode for us to talk about how this is changing pricing, okay? But for you as a family making a decision, you don't care about getting into pricing strategy for education. Not right now. What you care about right now is what is the decision that's going to keep you moving down the path towards the target you set on the wall. So if you set a clear target that says, in 5 years, I want to be highly qualified for my dream job, then which choice keeps you moving down that path? Okay, so if you can come up with a fantastic strategy for how you're going to spend the next year of your life moving down that path, not at college, great. And I'm really looking forward to helping some families come up with those great plans. And that's part of what we're going to do in the workshop next week. Okay. But if you're just going to wait and see what happens and you don't have a plan, look, let's talk about the scenario that's going to happen. Okay. If you don't go to school, if you get in, so you've already done all the work to apply to college and you've been accepted at a bunch of colleges, you get to choose between them, right? And so now the thing is, let's choose the best one, the best option for you. And the other option is to not go, okay? I do not believe that a whole lot of colleges and universities are going to hand out deferrals this year.
They can't afford to.
They cannot afford to do it, you guys. They don't hand them out very often anyway. And if they hand out a bunch of deferrals, now they have to adjust their strategy for next year. So if you get a deferral, good. That means you had a fantastic plan you proposed. But if you didn't get an official deferral from the school, now what you're looking at is you're going to have to reapply next year. And 37% of Americans are doing something different this year, and they're all planning to reapply next year along with next year's class. So you've got a bunch of campuses who are very likely going to be in a very different situation next year, very different finances, very different campus situation. Some schools are going to close. We're already seeing schools are closed. So very possibly we're going to have a situation on all those campuses where they can admit a smaller number of students because they can't put as many people in the dorms, they can't put as many people in the classrooms, and or they're going to have to admit many more students as online only students. So they have room for a smaller number of students on campus, and yet they have 137% of the normal amount of students applying. So if you don't go to school this year, you're going to be in that pool. It's a much larger pool of students for either the same size or smaller size entering classes. So you're applying, right? You're competing with a much larger number of students for a smaller number of spots. And you spent the year not in college. So what did you do with that year? And so if the right answer for you is to not go to college, then that's the right answer for you. But we really have to talk about how you spend the year so that when you turn around to apply into college in the following class, you are still competitive. You have done something with your year that matters. And that has helped move you down that road towards that target that we just talked about, because you can't just wait and see.
Yeah, to enter into a gap year without a plan is to chart yourself a course for disaster. Just ignore that iceberg in front of you.
Yeah.
But if you do enter with a plan, let's be also equally honest that some students could go out and spend that year and do incredibly useful for their career things and come back ready to go to school as a much more prepared student with a whole new skill set.
Yeah. So there are some amazing opportunities out there for students in this year. And I've got a question from Stacy. Stacy, keep it coming. I don't know, and meanwhile, I'll finish my sentence. So there are amazing bunch of options out there for students for a gap year. And an official gap year is something that I don't think is going to be available for a whole lot of students. But taking a year off in an unofficial gap year or a coronavirus gap year, and instead spending that year to do something cool and amazing. Like, there are tons of good opportunities out there, but we really need to design them. We really need to make sure that you're taking advantage of free and online education, or that you are working on something that matters to your community, or in some other way. We want to make sure that you're learning, right? Learning is the name of the game. So I think I want to encourage people to go to either schoolnewssaturday.com or to rockstaracademics.com to get information about next week's workshop, and join us. It's going to be a 3-hour workshop. It's for families and students. So parents join with your students. And quite frankly, the program that we have designed for next week is going to be useful for adults in planning their goals too. So, it's really going to be great for the whole family. So really want to encourage you, go to rockstaracademics.com or go to schoolnewssaturday.com, either way. And plan to join us next Saturday, because we're going to talk about how to create an environment for good decision making about the fall, how to evaluate schools and other options and weigh the costs and benefits of each of them, and how to set goals that can guide your choices and give you confidence that you are still making progress towards the life you want, because that's what really matters here. We can get distracted talking about whether Zoom is worth $50,000. And it's really a straw man, because nobody faced $50,000 and nobody's expecting it to be Zoom classes either. So it's a bit of a straw man, but it is a good stand-in for, look, families, we really need to be analytical and data driven about this decision and decide what's right, instead of just guessing, closing our eyes, or having a wait and see strategy, which is just going to end up wasting a bunch of time. So Stacy has a question, and I'm going to take a look at it. And we are really close to the end of the hour too. And so I want to encourage you, if you have questions, to go ahead and put them in. The broadcast will be over at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock, but I always stay a little while just to chat. So Stacy's question is, what about 20 to 21 students trying? What about 2021 students trying to go to college? They're canceling the SAT. So Stacy means, what about juniors? What about the class of juniors who, and so right now we're filling the Rockstar academics practice for the year with one-on-one coaching clients. And so students who are juniors finishing their junior year right now, those are the students that we're meeting we're bringing them into the Rockstar academics family for the year. So these are the folks we are talking to all day long right now. Students who are just finishing their junior year, and looking at what ought to be the normal course of action for the summer between junior and senior year, which is to be studying for the SAT, taking their AP exams, hopefully maybe doing some kind of great internship, getting ahead for senior year, and working on this big college decision, right? And so summertime is the time to be making this choice. Really is a time to be getting some good guidance from a guidance counselor or from a private coach like me, to be taking a look at the target ACT score that was going to get you where you want to go, and then studying to make sure you achieve that target score, starting to look at the variety of colleges out there to try and figure out what's going to be a good match for you, going to visit those campuses and evaluating where the faculty are teaching great innovative programs in your future major. And almost none of that's possible right now. Stacey's question is exactly right. What about these students who are trying to choose a college? They can't even take their SAT. They can't even show up and take it the way they've prepared. They can't visit campuses. And the theme of the day is, it's not even really easy to read what campuses are saying they're going to do and have a clue about what's really going to be like. It's a great question, Stacy. And it gives me an opportunity to put our last headline up for a second, and as part of the answer. So here was our last headline that we had to talk about, which was, Jean, you see my screen? Yeah, you guys are seeing my slide. Okay, so this is the last headline. So AP tests. So Stacy's question is about, I think, about basically how are standardized tests going to be used and administered in this time. So the first experiment for that was AP exams, which are administered by the College Board. It's the same organization that administers the SATs. So we've been listening, conference calls and webinars and private calls, listening to the executives of these organizations, the College Board and the ACT, talking about how are they going to solve this problem? What are they going to do? They've canceled, because they canceled tests in May, and they've canceled and postponed tests in June. And what would they do about those ACT and SAT tests if they have to deliver them online? And so one of the things that one of the first set of responses was, well, we're rolling out the AP tests online, and we're going to see how that goes. Mm-hmm. And that's what that is part of what was going on there, was that they were going to see how that goes. The AP tests are a little bit lower stakes than the ACT and SAT. And so they rolled out the AP tests online using systems that they've used before. And a couple weeks ago, I think I talked in some depth about how those shortened AP tests, right? So AP tests this year, they were delivered online. They were just 45-minute free-form essay questions. And there was some conversation, like, does this test gauge a student's achievement as well as the big long tests that we're used to? And of course, the answer is actually statistically yes. That 45-minute test does gauge a student's attainment almost exactly as well as the longer tests. They have years and years and years worth of data showing that those essay tests do just as well. So the fact is that those long multiple choice tests are being given for a different reason than, right? So yes, so the format, the 45-minute test, the format is tested and it works. But delivering it online had not been tested. Delivering it en masse to, 250,000 students a day, and the way the test was delivered was at the exact same hour around the globe, right? So students in Asia had to wake up and take the test in the middle of the night, because in order to
But that's equally fair.
because that's equally fair. Yes, exactly. So students in different parts of the world had to take it at a different hour of the day, because the test was administered at the exact same hour all over the globe. And so 250,000 students had to upload their answers at the exact same moment. And of course, they anticipated difficulties. And of course, they had difficulties. And so less than 1% of students have had technical difficulties, but in 1 million tests, that means 10,000 students spent an hour writing a test response and then couldn't submit it, and then got a note saying, you're gonna have to take the test again. So not surprisingly, there's been a petition. There were problems. So what does that mean, right? Because we've been saying, okay, well, they're going to do it online, and then they're going to figure out how to do it. And so we're going to see online ACT and online SAT tests in the summer and the fall. So now there were problems. What does that mean? Well, I think it means we're going to see online testing for the ACT and the SAT in the fall. And I think it means there are going to be problems. But I also think that the higher education industry has responded pretty well with the testing optional change. So, there's a tremendous amount of inequity that's being exposed by all of the online delivery of education and content and testing, right? Families, I saw the number yesterday. 21 million students don't have access to high-speed internet at home, right? So if you don't have that access, you are at a disadvantage if the test is delivered this way. And so because of that, most schools, many schools, the majority of schools have gone test optional, which removes, in theory, it removes the disadvantage for a student who either wasn't able to take the test or wasn't able to score well because the test was delivered in a different way than they prepared. But it still leaves the opportunity for a student who gets a really high score to benefit from that score. And this is in parallel, it basically mirrors the way public school districts have responded to the grading question, which is the sort of doctrine of hold the student harmless. So a student can't be penalized for not doing well over this period of time, but they do have the opportunity to raise their grade. So what does it mean they're canceling the tests? Well, Stacy, first of all, I don't believe that there will be 0 opportunities to take the test, right? So while in-person tests are being canceled, I would bet the farm that there will be an opportunity for a student to go and take the test. And so I am encouraging families who have the ability to take advantage of that test in whatever form it arrives, right? I am encouraging students to take advantage of it. So if you have the ability to take that online test and you have the ability to prepare to do well in that test, do it, right? Adapt, respond, adapt, and do the best you can. And really, a bad score can't hurt you very much. And I do want to emphasize that I believe that's true. So a bad score can't hurt you. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by showing up and trying and doing the best you can. So if the school, if the only way you can take that SAT or that ACT is to take it online, and I think it's very possible that that will be the only way, then go take it. And if you do well, fantastic. And I am working on, I am revising the SAT, ACT prep class that we've done for a couple of years to respond to the online test. So it's not available today because we're waiting to see, this is an exception for wait and see, as we're waiting to see how the online test is going to be delivered. And then I'm going to revise the course so that students can take the course and learn based on how the test is going to come out. If you have the opportunity to do that, if you can prepare, if you can get to the online delivery and take it, do it. there's going to be a chance for you to take the test. So if you can take that opportunity, take it and do the best you can. Okay. If you can't, if it's not something you can do, right? It's at 3 o'clock in the morning because you live in Kuala Lumpur, and that's just not going to work for you. You're going to be okay without it, right? So I don't believe that it will be canceled. I don't believe that there will be no chances. I think it's going to be different. And I think that each student is going to have to respond the best they can, which is another theme that we've had all year, all through all these, is do the best you can at the thing that's in front of you and work with someone to make sure you tell that story well. Schools are looking for excellent students. That's never going to change. So if you are a junior and you are just getting started on this journey, I would recommend that you and your family, your mom, your dad, that you guys book a 30-minute call with me so we can talk about your family situation, because I do think it's going to require a better educated consumer when it comes to the education product. So you need to be a more educated consumer, and one way you can do that is have a free conversation with me or someone like me. So you're going to have to do a little more work to make sure that you're making a good choice, but get started on that journey is the answer. Students, juniors, you're getting started on that journey. Now's the time. Don't put it off. Don't wait and see. I think that's the overall message of the day is please do not wait and see what happens. You really need a plan. You really need to get focused and get proactive about making sure that the year that's coming matters. That's what.
We should make that a headline. Don't wait and see.
Don't wait and see. Make sure it matters.
Yeah, because something that I want to emphasize that you've talked about before is that an SAT, ACT score that's marginal this year, there's probably going to be no pastime that will be as forgiven. After all, there are several institutions that are saying,
That's true.
we're not even going to require you take that. And that's a real change of those institutions. That's like at glacial speed. That's like going through a corner with all windscreen. So they've made that decision. However, you and I both know that the institution is not going to totally ignore that score. If you did well, then you still did well. Congratulations. And it will still help you. So it's you've almost never had a better get out of jail free card that a bad score is not really going to hurt you terribly because they're maybe not going to look hard. But if you do well, they're going to look, they're going to know, and that will be helpful.
Yeah, and Stacey said, thank you. I'm glad that we answered the question. I think that's exactly right. So look, the overall message is a message that I've been giving to students for years and years and years, which is, in a nice way, like, get off your butt. Get off your butt and find a way to make the time you have mattered and to do a great job at something. And a couple of weeks ago, I said something along the lines of, look, if the job is take care of your kids so mom can work, go do a great job at that. And then when it's time for you to apply to college, we'll tell them why that was the right thing for you to do, right? So the workshop that we're doing next week, it's a goals and gap years workshop. It's going to be a 3-hour workshop. It's going to be a workshop with capital W. We're going to do some work. We're going to help you figure out what the target is on the wall that I keep pointing out for you for this year. And then after we figure out what that target is, we are going to figure out what's the best plan of action for your family for the year. So I really encourage folks to consider spending a couple hours with us. We can get a tremendous amount done. And you can go to rockstaracademics.com to find out more about that, or schoolnewssaturday.com, either one. Okay, guys, I have this beautiful video and I just want to humor me because it's so, it's like an art project. We had this great video guy who put the video together for the workshop. So I want to play it, and then I'm going to let that roll us out of the hour. And I hope to see all of you next week, and maybe hear from some of you on calls this week beforehand. Does that sound good, Jean?
That sounds like a great time. So thank you all for showing up.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to roll this video. Oh, wait, I think I didn't push the button I had to push. Share screen. Share computer sound. Here we go. So watch the video. It's going to tell. Are you guys seeing a black screen? my God, I'm going to try it one more time. Ay, ay, ay. Here we go. Okay, guys, here's my cool video about the workshop for next week. This is 1 minute long. Hang out with us, all right? What you're after, setting the goal that says, I'm doing this because I want to be an architect, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to be, you know, a New York Times journalist. And then having that be the thing that keeps you moving forward when the obstacles come along. It's easier to understand why the classes are worth it, why the tuition is worth it, why changing your plans might be worth it if you have this target that you're aiming at. Constantly checking, am I on target? Am I on target? Do I need to move that target? Instead of, well, we'll just keep moving forward and maybe it'll become clear someday. Because it doesn't. It doesn't become clear if you don't do the work. Yay, he did such a good job. All right. Okay, guys. So I'm going to let roll us out. And thank you so much for joining us on School News Saturday, May 16th. We will see you next week. Have a great Saturday, guys.